In the times of old, there was magic. That's what my mother would say when she would begin one of her stories. This simple statement had to be accepted as fact before any of the ancient tales could be told. This was also an explanation, an answer to a child's questions. She would send me into the woods with the other girls in the town to collect plants and berries, and I would ask, "Why can we not go near the ring of stones?" And she would answer, "In times of old, there was magic." I would say, "Why must the dead be bound in ropes and cloth tied over their eyes?" Her reply would begin, "In times of old, there was magic." Then she would tell us of the spirits which linger near the stone rings, or how the newly dead might leave their graves to find their way home. It seems that although we never saw magic, we still must respect and live in fear of it. I learned as a very small child that there were rules which must be upheld in order to assure that magic did not re-enter the world. You would see the magic and think it was beautiful, she would say, but as it wrapped itself around you, your life would become like a dark dream from which there is no awakening. I realize now that even though in my childlike way I believed her, I truly did not understand, not until the rules were broken, not until magic had already crept into my life. Ironically, it would be my mother who disobeyed the rules and let the magic in. I learned a very important lesson that oftentimes adults would warn children of things which they themselves did not fully believe. My name is Asha, and I was but a little girl when magic's nightmare began. My father was a farmer, and he lived in a cottage far away from the village, which was the center of this dark little land. After the harvest, he would fill a cart with the fruits of reaping and journey to the town to sell his wares. On the year of my 12th summer, I watched as his cart disappeared over the distant hill in the early morning, leaving my mother and me to ourselves for many days before his return. That year, I would watch as my mother walked off into the woods by herself. She would return on such days exhausted and sleepy-eyed, with tangled hair and dirt on her clothes. She would say that she was gathering fallen nuts or finding food for the fire, but she would always return with nothing but a strange smile. Then, as the days turned cold, she announced that she was with child. This made my father very happy. He hoped that now he would finally have a son. In the heat of the following summer, the midwives came from the village, and there on the table where we peeled potatoes and ate our meals, she screamed and fought until my brother was born. His name was Gills, after my grandfather, and he was a lovely and sweet baby. In the evenings, my mother would let me sit with him by the fire and hold him as she worked in the house. I was delighted by his warm little hands and soft round face. From the very beginning, I loved him very much. Once more the harvest came, and that was when I began to suspect that something was not normal about my little brother. He became very strong and took to walking early. He toddled in the grass, chasing after birds and lifting heavy stones to see the creatures which crawled underneath. Sometimes he would catch bugs and quickly eat them before I could slap them from his tiny hands. Very soon, he would begin to refuse my mother's breast, and instead would cry and beg as my mother slaughtered a pig for our winter meat. He would wait until my mother was occupied and would catch the draining blood in his hands and drink as if from a stream. Mother never saw these things, and it would be far into the winter before we began to notice Gil's strange habits. When she did begin to finally see, she became afraid, and more she left me to tend my little brother. Gills had not even seen his first summer when I noticed the sharp teeth growing from his pink gums. The teething left him with an urge to bite and gnaw on leather and bone. My father laughed when he saw these things. He was so very proud of his strong little son, but mother had grown increasingly distant and wary. Gills repulsed her, and I dare say that he was not overly fond of her either. 4 years had passed, and I was a woman grown. Boys and widowers came from the village, and soon I would be expected to marry. I could not tell them that I feared leaving Gills alone with my mother. As I had feared, my mother's wanderings during the days of autumn had not ended with the birth of my brother. She would leave us alone during the cold, dark days and go into the woods only to return just before dark, dazed and disheveled. Often I had thought of telling my father of her absences, but deep in the core of my heart I could reason only disaster if he were to know. One day she had left, and I was chopping wood in the hills. After a few minutes of toil, I looked about for my brother, and I could not find him. At 4 years old, he was as tall as 10, and the muscle which corded his pale arms was that of a man. His eyes were of a beastly aspect, and when his temper flared, I thought I saw a dim glow of red beneath a brow which was thick and low. His hair grew like a thick black forest, and the shadow of a beard had begun to grow along the line of his jaw. His ferocity and odd demeanor had only increased with each passing year, and I had taken to carrying a switch with which to strike him to keep him from killing our dogs and chickens. As I dropped the axe to my side and wiped the sweat from my eyes, I called out to him, but he was nowhere to be seen. I took my father's hunting dog, an old hound named Greenwell, and gave him the scent of my brother's shirt which to follow. Greenwell took me on a direct course for the dark woods where mother had gone early in the morning hours. The dog took me to a path which I had never known existed, and from there I had but to follow as he delved farther into the forest along the clear, cold stream. The sky had darkened, and an early snow began to fall over the thick layers of fallen leaves which blanketed the forest floor. After an hour I had grown chill, but Greenwell's barks drew me onward as I called for Gills, now not caring if mother knew I was following. I came to a clearing and sat there on a little mound of earth was a huntsman's shack huddled beneath the tall leaves of the deep trees. As I walked into the open, I could see that scattered along the edges of the clearing were stones of an ancient circle, overgrown with lichen and moss. Fool, I thought, to build a cabin in a stone ring. Greenwell was poised outside the shack, prowling and barking with a feverish, panicked fury. I ran to his side and hunched down to calm him. I could see smoke rising from the little brick chimney and saw that the door of the shack was half open. I told Greenwell to stay and moved closer to the door and pushed it open only to fall on my knees at horror of what I saw within. The walls within were painted in splashes of thick red blood. Upon a cot by the fire were the butchered remains of 2 people caught naked in a lover's entanglement. I screamed when I saw the eyes of my mother peering out from the hacked slaughter of her and her huntsman's flesh. There, warming himself by the fire, was Gills, gnawing on a severed strip of scarlet muscle on a thick, long bone. Gills, I whispered. By the moon, what have you done? You have killed our mother. She was mother, he said calmly, as he wiped crimson from his mouth onto his sleeve. No more than he was my father. But our father is at town, Gills, I said, weeping as he gazed at me with his black animal eyes. Your father, not mine, he answered as he stood, and I saw the hunting blade which he had used to end the lives of the 2 on the cot. Then who is your father? I asked. I haven't met him. I don't believe I ever shall. He's a thing of the woods, I think. Spirit of the dark. They come to these rings at this time of year, for in times of old there were those who would make sacrifice to them on altars of stone. He told me so in dreams, but I only hear his voice. What are we going to do, Gills? Go home, wait for your dad. You should burn this shack. Tell him mother has gone lost, or whatever tale you can tell of her. And what of you? I'm not good for the world of men. I'm a creature of the wilds. Go, Asha. Be well. You've been good to me. I bear you and your father no ill will. I feel only sadness that your mother was such a wicked thing. I watched as he stood and fell back into the cold as he passed me and strode off into the woods, alone with the snow falling over his shoulders and sticking in his hair. I did as he had said and set the shack to flames with a branch from the fire. With Greenwell at my side, I went walking back to our cottage, knowing it would be many days before father would return. He was filled with grief when I told him that Gills and mother had been lost in the woods gathering firewood. He wept as I had never seen him weep before. For many months that winter I thought that grief might end his life. When spring came, he told me that we were leaving the farm and we would move to the town to begin a new life. Over the next few years, he found another wife and I a husband. His new bride was a portly townswoman who fed him too much and in time made him fat and happy. My husband was a clockmaker who made more money than what we needed, and I bore him 3 children over the coming years. One night, I was forced to rescue him from the tavern where he had stayed late drinking in the town. As I half carried him home, he kissed me on the cheek and slurred, "Have you heard the tale, Zasha?" "I have heard a tale which says that drink makes a man's wit slow and his manhood limp and damp as a straw." He laughed. "No, my dear, the tales of the beasts that they have seen in the north." I felt a chill in my blood as I remembered that day long ago within the ring of stones. "No, I have not. What do they say?" "They say that there is a beast like the one spoken of in the days of old, an ogre which roams the forest and scavenges in graveyards for the flesh of the dead. He is said to stand as tall as 2 men and have fangs like that of a bear. There is even a talk of bounty for many men who can bring his head to town." Sounds like children's stories to me. "Ah, yes, but all stories come from some fact. Perhaps it is just some wild man who has taken to robbing graves. Either way, some of us have decided on taking a trip to the north to see if it is true." "Are you such a fool?" I shouted. "The drink has turned you dumb. What could you do against a cow, let alone a monster? For the sake of the moon, you are a clockmaker. What shall you do? Keep the time as it takes for these men to be killed?" "Have you such a low opinion of me?" he said suddenly, downcast and sodden. "I hold you in the highest esteem as a man, but I do not gauge your worth as a warrior to be much more than that of a child." This would only serve to injure his delicate pride, and in the following weeks he would only become more determined to join the party which would go hunting for the beast of the north. Despite my pleading, I watched him go with the other men of the town as they climbed on their horses and set off on the road into the wilds. For 3 nights my sleep was wrought with horrid visions of fate which was certain to befall my sweet husband. On the 3rd morning I went to my father and took to him my children. I asked him to watch them and in case of tragedy to raise them. "But they are men," he said, begging. "They will be fine, Asha. You will only humiliate your fine husband with his folly." "Folly it could be, but I will not suffer losing another loved one to those words." He only stared at me with eyes worn and exhausted with years of sorrow. Then go and be careful. I told him that I would be, and taking the fastest horse from the stable, set off for the land of my birth. Finding these men was no difficult chore. They had made a great party of their hunt and had stopped at nearly every inn on the road to drink and feast. When I found them, they were camped in a field littered with tents and fires. Beneath the shining stars of the summer sky, they roasted a giant boar on a spit as they drank wine and fired muskets at empty bottles on a fallen tree. As I rode up to the camp, my husband's eyes fell upon me from a drunken stupor, and much to my relief, instead of some prideful reprimand, he hooted with pleasure and embraced me. "Asha, you worrisome girl, you could not stand to have me eaten by the beast," he was laughing at. "Some great hunt. This is a summer's wine tasting at best," I said, shaking my head in disgust, but not believing him. "We have hunted, my dear. Did you not see the outstanding boar roasting on the fire, while I myself fired the killing shot?" "From your breath, I would say you have drunk a killing shot of clear spirits." This brought a chorus of laughter against from the other men. "Come on, then, and have yourself a glass, dear. You have the privilege of being the only woman to accompany us in our adventure." "Quite a privilege indeed," I said as I took the cup and drank. We sat around the fire and had a merry round of drinking and song before eating the delicious meal and settling into our tents with warm blankets to slumber. At least the other men slumbered. My husband was allowed a privilege or two himself that night before sleep took us. My anger at his stupidity had been abated by my gratitude that his group had not suffered some awful fate. I allowed myself the hope that this hunt might continue as it were with no incident of danger. The following morning I would find that my hope was things but the weak imagining of their own destiny. We were awakened the next morning by the mad cries of one of the younger men. We leapt from our tent, half asleep, and struggled into our clothes to find the others gathered around the remains of 3 of our horses. While our group had lain in deep drunken slumber, something had dragged the horses off into the field and crushed them as if they were fragile, fine porcelain dolls. The pack of fine hunting dogs had been strewn over the field in bloody piles of mashed and mauled flesh. Something enormous and strong with a ravenous appetite had feasted on the bodies and left only strips of sinew hanging from their bones. The men had begun loading their muskets and shouldering their swords as they prepared to follow the deep tracks which had led off into the forest sage. "No, this is a fool's quest," I said, pulling at my husband's arm as he tightened the scabbard at his belt. "This is what we came here for, my love," he answered, as patronizing, as calm as any idiot determined to meet his own end. "No, you have come to drink and shoot at bottles. What you will find in those woods is no boar or bear. And what do you know of what waits?" I looked at him with desperation and contemplated telling him. And there the strange story of my days, living on a farm in those lands. However, my tongue betrayed me, and I could only weep hysterically as he strode off to join the other fools. "Wait here, Asha. We will return by dusk, and perhaps I will have a trophy to show at the tavern." He was laughing again over his shoulder as he left. As I watched them disappear amongst the swaying trees and dense green underbrush, I gathered a dagger and a pistol from my things. I followed silently behind, well out of range of their detection. I had been raised in these woods and knew the practice of roaming them better than most others. I thought of poor old Greenwill and wished that he were at my side again. No dog had known the sense of danger better than he, and he had died a peaceful and silent death beside a warm hearth many, many years ago. As I swept through the thorns and over rocks, I could hear the men laughing and jesting with complete certainty of their own superiority over anything they may confront. How can men be such fools? I could not comprehend the level of arrogance it took for adults to parade in the face of death as if they were celebrating a birth at some beer hall. It was then the memory of my mother slinking off to a forbidden circle of stones to meet her lover entered my mind, and I realized that it was not just men who could be fools. The hunters had come across a steep rise on the forest floor, and above them on a hill, ascending from the forest, was the mouth of a cave, sheltered beneath an overhang of gray stone. The hill was littered in a profusion of bones, which ranged from the aged and gray to those bleached and white, and still stained pink with blood. It was here that it seemed that the men had finally got a taste of fear, for now they grew silent and hunched low as they climbed the hill's face. The very air stank of rot mixed with the forest smells of damp earth and ruined wildflowers. It took only the falling of a single small rock to alarm the hunters, and they took shelter behind stumps and boulders. As I watched, I saw a shape emerge from the depths of the cave, and immediately I knew that all my fears had been validated. I recognized the giant and twisted shape which loomed at the top of the hill as none other than that of my brother, Gills. He had grown to the height of some 25 hands, and his flesh, which was broken and torn as if the body beneath it had outgrown its covering, was as pale and as transparent as the belly of a dead fish. Every network of fine blue vein could be seen crossing over the lines of tight animal muscle, which could be seen in open, gray-hued crevices in his flesh. The massive crown of his skull emerged through a putrid, rotted mass of dead tissue and pus-filled sores. His lower jaw had lengthened out beyond the upper to be filled with a long throng of fangs and 2 dagger-like tusks. His long black hair hung from the exposed bone of his cranium in knotted, matted, and greasy clumps over the red-stained, fleshless bones of his shoulders, like a foul, bug-infested cloak, enshrouding black animal eyes, which reflected light in alternating red and yellow. There came a throaty, growling sound, which in time I knew to be his laughter. "How do the little men come from their pet?" he shouted in a voice like the howl of a wolf and the lament of the dead in one. It was then I saw he carried the carcass of one of the horses still intact in his hand like a bag of refuse. Well then, by all means, take it. And with that, he threw the horse at a group of 3 hunters who were crouched behind an oak stump. The force it would take to hurl the weight of the animal with such ease had to have been immense. The body flew through the air and landed against the stump with an impact so tremendous as to send the 3 tumbling backwards down the hill. All of the men were shaking and pale with terror as Gil's laughter echoed through the woods, silencing every bird and insect nearby from song. "Ah, but I am surrounded," the monster found. "Perhaps I should surrender myself to these mighty warriors." Gills held up his thick talon-like skeletal hands in mock helplessness. "No, I think not." And in one quick moment, he snatched a rock from the ground, the size of a water bucket, and sent it flying through the air like a cannonball where it struck the tree behind where my husband had hid. The wood and bark of the maple exploded with splinters as the tree shook and swayed from the blow. My hands trembled as I saw the others now pull back the hammers of their rifles and open fire. Black clouds of smoke puffed from their guns as loud cracks issued and bullets tore through Gills, leaving only small welts of blood trickling from his chest and arms. "Ho ho! So the game is afoot!" he shouted with laughter as he charged down the hill, flinging stones like balls rolled by children in the street. The rocks exploded against the boulders and trees where the hunters hid frantically trying to reload. But their error was now irrevocable as Gills fell upon the closest 2 and ripped them from the ground like saplings and smashed their bodies together with a wretched and difficult crunch. He dropped the 2 corpses and turned on a young peddler with his sword drawn and gripped the man's forearm before ripping it from his shoulder in one quick blur of movement. There were screams and blood as the 4 town militiamen ran forth, striking at the monster with their blades, only to be thrown and beaten by fists like enormous blacksmith hammers. I saw with horror that my husband had managed to reload his weapon and had stepped into the open to fire. I tried to scream, but his finger had tightened and the bullet had flown. It struck Gills on the shoulder, but he did not even wince. He looked upon the poor, trembling father of my children with disease and greedy hunger. As the huge thing began to move forward, I jumped from the bushes and ran to my husband's side. "Stop!" I cried out. "Gills, do not do this!" I placed myself between them and held out my hands, pleading. Gills stopped and stared at me intently for what seemed an eternity. He studied me as if fighting to recall some memory long buried in years of dark, isolated misery. "Asha," he whispered. "Yes, it's me. Do you remember me?" I said, wishing and hoping that some trace of the little boy I had known was left within the soul of the blackness before me. "I do," he said, as if now seeing some scene played out in his mind, long lost, but now clear and real. "I have missed you." "I missed you too," I answered as I held my hand behind me, to my still husband who seemed confused and terrified. "Have you been well?" Gills asked, as if we were 2 siblings meeting each other in the street after only a brief time apart. "I have been. This is my husband. We have 3 children together." "They came to kill me," he stated calmly as he eyed the band of broken men lying scattered around him. "Yes, but they do not know you," I answered. "You do, though, don't you, sister? You would not have let them come if you could have stopped them." "I tried, Gills. I truly did. But they were fools." Gills chuckled as he sat upon them. "I am very tired. I have been alone for so long, Asha. I do not want this." I stepped forward and met his stare as the red glow faded, and all that was left were his own dark and tragic eyes, the eyes of a sad beast now longing for peace. "You have a knife," he said, pointing to the dagger at my waist. "Put it here," he said, pointing to a spot near the center of his chest. "And with all your strength, push it as deep as it will go." "I don't know if I can do that." "Yes, you can. You are very strong, big sister. You can give me this last gift, and With tears running from my eyes, I drew the dagger and held the tip over his heart. I looked into his eyes one last time, and I saw the little baby which I had held in my arms and rocked by the fire. I pushed the blade and watched as he closed his eyes and slumped forward into my arms. I held the beast and wept over him as he died. I realized then that all the old stories were true. Magic must always be held at bay, and the wall which separates us from that darkness must never fall. When the rules are broken, there are those things which can slip in like shadows from the darkness, and when they come, they will corrupt and punish and taint everything of light that they touch. That is why, my children, you must all remember that in the old time,